The rain fell in silver needles across Manhattan's Upper East Side, turning the gutters into black mirrors that reflected the cold glow of passing headlights. At the corner of 72nd and Lexington, beneath the awning of a closed artisanal bakery, a girl no older than 21 sat on a flattened cardboard box, cradling an infant against her chest. Her coat, once navy, now the color wet ash, had lost 2 buttons and most of its warmth. The baby slept in restless fits. Tiny fists clenched as though even in dreams she fought the wind. A Maybach Glide whispered to the curb. The rear door opened before the driver could move. Alexander Voss stepped out without an umbrella, the rain immediately darkening the shoulders of his charcoal Brioni overcoat. 42 years old, self-made, feared in boardrooms, photographed at galas with women who looked carved from marble. None of that mattered in the moment his eyes found the girl. She didn't notice him at first. She was murmuring to the child in a language that sounded like a lullaby drowning. When she finally looked up, her gaze was flat, exhausted, already braced for the usual dismissal or worse. Alexander crouched, bringing himself to her level on the wet sidewalk. Water soaked the knees of his $10,000 suit, without him seeming to care. "What's your name?" he asked, voice low enough that the rain almost swallowed it. She hesitated, weighing whether names still matter when you had nothing left to protect. "Lena," she said at last. "And this is Sophia." The baby stirred at her name, gave a small aggrieved cry, then settled again. Alexander studied them both for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind his storm-gray eyes. Then he did something no one on that street expected from a man whose net worth could fund small nations. He took off his coat and draped it over Lena's shoulders. The cashmere engulfed her and the baby both. "Come with me," he said. "Not a question." Lena laughed once, a cracked, disbelieving sound. "Mister, I don't do that. Whatever you're thinking." "I'm thinking," he cut in gently, "that no child should sleep on concrete tonight, and neither should her mother." He extended a hand, not commanding, simply there. People on the sidewalk slowed, phones rising like periscopes. Tomorrow the clips would be everywhere. Billionaire Alexander Voss picks up homeless girl. The headlines would be merciless, the speculation worse. He knew it and didn't care. Lena looked at the offered hand, then at Sophia's tiny flushed cheeks. She took it. 40 minutes later, the Maybach pulled to the private gates of a limestone mansion on East 74th. The staff, accustomed to models, diplomats, occasional royalty, froze in the marble foyer as their employer walked in carrying a dripping cardboard sign that read "Anything helps, God bless," while the girl in his borrowed coat clutched her baby like contraband. Mrs. Kearney, the housekeeper who had raised 3 children of her own and terrified interns for sport, appeared instantly with warm towels and the kind of brisk kindness that brooks no argument. Alexander led them past the grand staircase, past the Warhols and the Basquiat everyone whispered he'd overpaid for, down a corridor most guests never saw, to a guest suite the size of most apartments. A fire already crackled on the hearth. Someone on staff moved faster than physics allowed. Lena stood in the doorway clutching Sophia, afraid to step onto the silk rug with shoes that had walked through subway puddles and worse. Alexander noticed. He knelt again, this time to untie her frayed laces and slide the ruined sneakers off himself. His fingers brushed the holes in her socks, and for the first time in years something that felt dangerously close to shame moved through him. "There's a bath," he said. "Food. A doctor on call if the baby needs one. Whatever you need tonight, it's yours." Lena's voice came out small. "Why?" He met her eyes. "Because once, a long time ago, someone did this for me, and I promised if I ever could, I would pay it back." He left before she could answer. An hour later, Lena sat in a robe too large for her, hair damp and clean for the first time in weeks, watching Sophia sleep in a real crib lined with blankets that smelled of lavender and money. The fire painted shifting gold across the walls. She should have felt safe. Instead, every instinct screamed trap. Downstairs, Alexander stood at the kitchen island, a room larger than most restaurants, pouring 2 fingers of something old and expensive he didn't taste. Mrs. Kearney lingered. "You brought home strays before, sir," she said carefully. "Never like this. This one's different. Homeless girls with babies usually are. He gave a short, humorless laugh. I'm not trying to buy absolution, if that's what you're worried about. Mrs. Kearney raised an eyebrow that had ended careers. Then what are you trying to do? He had no answer. Not yet. Upstairs, Lena found the phone he'd left charging on a nightstand, brand new, no passcode. The gesture felt too deliberate to be kindness. She stared at the screen until it dimmed, then opened the camera and took a photo of Sophia sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. She sent it to the only number still in her contacts, Mara, the friend who'd stopped answering weeks ago. Delivered. No dots. No reply. She set the phone down and walked to the window. Central Park spread out below like a dark ocean. Somewhere out there were the shelters that turned her away, the caseworkers who'd lost her paperwork, the ex who'd taken everything but this child. Behind her, the bedroom door opened without a knock. Alexander stood in the threshold holding a tray. Warm milk, fresh strawberries, a grilled cheese cut diagonally the way his own mother used to make when he was small, and the world still had edges soft enough not to cut. I thought you might be hungry, he said. Lena turned slowly. In the firelight, her eyes were older than her face. Tell me what you want, she said, voice steady for the first time all night. Because nobody gives something this big for nothing. Not ever. Alexander set the tray down. He looked at the baby, then at the woman who had carried her through hell on foot. I want, he said quietly, to find out what happens when someone who has everything meets someone who has nothing left to lose. And I want to see which one of us changes first. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing the city clean enough to start again. Inside, two strangers and a sleeping child stood on the edge of something neither of them had a name for yet. And whatever it became, it started that night. Lena didn't move toward the tray. She stayed by the window, arms folded under the borrowed robe, as if holding herself together. The fire hissed when a drop of rain found its way down the chimney. Alexander waited. He had spent years learning how silence could be a weapon in negotiations. Now he surrendered it completely, letting it belong to her. Finally she spoke, barely above the crackle of logs. You said someone once did this for you. He nodded once. Who? A woman I never saw again. He moved to the armchair opposite the crib, but didn't sit, as though the furniture might reject him tonight. I was 12. My mother had just died. The state placed me with a family who decided one extra mouth was one too many. They put me out on the curb with a garbage bag of clothes the day before Christmas. A stranger driver for someone rich saw me trying to sleep in the doorway of a church. He took me home instead of to a group facility. One night turned into a week, then a month. By the time anyone official noticed, the driver's employer had quietly enrolled me in a boarding school under a different last name. I still don't know why they did it. Lena listened without blinking. And you became this... She gestured vaguely at the room, the mansion, the impossible life beyond the door. I became obsessed, he corrected, with understanding why some people are saved and others rot, with making sure no one ever held that kind of power over me again. Money turned out to be the cleanest answer. She gave a soft, bitter laugh. Money's never clean. No, he agreed. It isn't. Sophia made a small sound in her sleep, and they both turned toward the crib like synchronized magnets. The baby settled again, tiny mouth working around an invisible meal. Lena's shoulders dropped a fraction. She's been hungry for days. Formula ran out yesterday. I was giving her sugar water. Her voice cracked on the last words. Shame and fury braided together. Alexander's jaw flexed. He reached for the intercom on the wall, pressed it. Mrs. Kearney, please bring the pediatrician now. And another bottle, 4 ounces, 98 degrees. Already on her way up, sir, came the calm reply, as if the household had been holding its breath for exactly this order. Lena stared at him. You planned this. I hoped, he said. There's a difference. Minutes later, the doctor, a kind-eyed woman in her 50s who clearly kept a bag in her car for midnight house calls to the ultra-wealthy, examined Sophia with gentle efficiency, while Lena hovered like a threatened cat. Temperature normal, lungs clear, weight low, but not critical. She showed Lena how to mix the hypoallergenic formula Alexander had apparently ordered in 3 different varieties. just in case. When the doctor left, Sophia was asleep again with a full belly and a clean diaper, her breathing deep and even for the first time in weeks. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly boneless. The adrenaline that had kept her upright for months was draining away, leaving her shaking. Alexander poured the warm milk from the tray into a china cup and pressed it into her hands. Drink. She obeyed because fighting seemed pointless now. The milk tasted like childhood and safety and lies. He watched her throat move as she swallowed. There's a room down the hall with a bigger bed. You can keep Sophia's crib beside it. Or you can stay here. Whatever makes you feel less like a prisoner. I am a prisoner, she said quietly. Just one with Egyptian cotton sheets tonight. He almost smiled. Fair. She set the cup down. Tomorrow I'll be gone before you wake up. You won't get past the gate, he said, not unkindly. Not because I'll stop you, but because the press is already camped on the sidewalk. Someone recognized me. By morning they'll have your name, your face, probably Sophia's blood type. If you walk out alone, they'll hunt you for the rest of your life. Lena closed her eyes. Then what am I supposed to do? Stay until we figure out how to give you a door. They can't follow you through. She laughed again, sharper this time. You're going to buy me a new life? That's what this is. I'm going to offer you choices, he said. Real ones. The kind that don't involve choosing which alley is safest to sleep in. And the price... He looked at her for a long moment. There isn't one. Not the kind you're imagining. Then you're insane. Probably. Silence pooled again, thicker now. Somewhere in the house a clock chimed 3. Lena stood, walked the crib, and touched Sophia's hair with one trembling finger. She deserves more than survival. Yes, he said. She does. Lena turned back to him. The robe had slipped off one shoulder, revealing the sharp line of her collarbone and a fading bruise the color of old wine. She didn't fix it. I'm not sleeping with you, she said flatly. Not tonight. Not ever. If that's a confusion here, let's clear it up now. Alexander inclined his head. Understood. She studied his face for deceit and found none she could name. It unsettled her more than hunger ever had. He moved toward the door. There are clothes in the dresser. Some still have tags. My assistant keeps sizes for unexpected guests. Toiletries in the bathroom. If you need anything else, pick up the phone and dial 0. Someone will answer. At the threshold, he paused. Lena. She looked up. For what it's worth, I'm not a good man. But tonight, I'm trying to be a better one than I was yesterday. He left, pulling the door until it rested on the latch, but didn't close. Lena stood in the middle of the vast room long after his footsteps faded, listening to the rain soften against the windows. Eventually she crossed to the dresser, opened drawers until she found soft cotton pajamas that fit almost perfectly. She changed, crawled into the bed that could have slept 6, and lay on top of the covers fully dressed, afraid to relax. She woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee and something cinnamon. For one disoriented second she thought she was 8 again, in her grandmother's apartment in Kiev before everything broke. Then Sophia's small cry anchored her to present. Mrs. Kearney was already in the room, lifting the baby with practiced ease. Good morning, Miss Lena. There's breakfast downstairs when you're ready. No rush. Lena sat up, hair wild, heart racing. Where is he? Mr. Voss left for the office at 5. He does that when he can't sleep. Said to tell you the car is yours today if you want it. Driver's discreet. Or you can stay inside. The gate will keep the vultures out. Lena rubbed her face. There are cameras everywhere, aren't there? Only in public areas. Your rooms are private. He was very clear. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, bare feet on silk rug that cost more than most cars. I need to make a call. Mrs. Kearney handed her a new iPhone still in its box, already charged. Only one number in the contacts. Lena looked. The contact read simply, "Hey." She stared at it until the screen went dark. Downstairs, breakfast was laid on a table that could seat 20. Fresh berries, eggs prepared 3 ways, pastries that looked illegal. Lena ate standing up, one hand on Sophia's back as the baby gummed a piece of banana in a high chair that had appeared overnight. When she finished, she found Mrs. Kearney in the hallway holding a thick cream envelope. "He asked me to give you this when you came down." Inside was a single sheet of heavy stationery and a black American Express card with her name already embossed. The note was handwritten in sharp, impatient ink. "Lena, use the card for whatever you and Sophia need. No limit, no questions. I'll be back after the markets close. If you're still here, we'll talk about next steps. If you're gone, I'll understand. Either way, the card stays active. Hey." She turned the card over in her fingers. It weighed almost nothing and everything. Mrs. Kearney cleared her throat gently. "There's a boutique on Madison that opens private hours for certain clients. They have everything for babies and mothers. I took the liberty of calling. They're expecting you any time before noon if you feel up to it." Lena looked at the older woman, searching for judgment and finding only patience. "I don't understand him," she said. Mrs. Kearney smiled, small and sad. "None of us do, dear. But he keeps his promises. That's rarer than the money." By 10 o'clock, Lena was in the back of a black Suburban. Sophia strapped into a car seat that probably cost more than the monthly rent of her last apartment. The driver never spoke unless spoken to. Paparazzi tried to follow. 2 identical Suburbans peeled off in different directions, and the tail was lost within blocks. The boutique had closed its doors to the public. Soft music, softer lighting, women who called her Madam, and brought her espresso in porcelain cups while measuring Sophia for clothes that would never be sold in stores. Lena walked out 2 hours later with bags that filled the cargo area. Cashmere blankets, tiny leather shoes, a coat for herself that made her feel like someone else entirely. Back at the house, she found a nursery had been assembled in the room adjacent to hers. Pale wood and white linen. A rocking chair by the window, a mobile of crystal stars that caught the winter light and threw it across the walls like spilled coins. On the changing table lay another envelope. This one contained a birth certificate, original, slightly water-stained, and a New York State ID with Lena's unsmiling DMV photo from 2 years ago. Paper clipped to them was a post-it in the same impatient handwriting. "Your old backpack is in the closet. Everything that was in it is here, cleaned where possible. Thought you might want proof you still exist on paper." She opened the closet. There was her ratty JanSport, now spotless, sitting on a shelf like a museum artifact. Inside, her few remaining possessions. A cracked phone with a dead battery, a library card, the sonogram photo from when she still believed in futures, and the silver bracelet her grandmother had worn every day until the day she died. Lena sat on the nursery floor and cried without sound, shoulders shaking while Sophia watched from the play mat with solemn blue eyes. At 4:47 p.m., the front door opened downstairs. She heard his voice first, low, clipped, giving instructions about calls to return, numbers that ended in too many zeros. Then footsteps on the stairs, steady and unhurried. He appeared in the nursery doorway, still in his topcoat, snow melting from his hair. For a moment, they simply looked at each other across the soft-lit room. "You stayed," he said. "I haven't decided yet," she answered, wiping her face with the sleeve of a sweater that had cost more than her first car. He nodded as if that was fair. Then he crossed the room, crouched beside Sophia, and let the baby wrap one tiny hand around his index finger. She held on with surprising strength. "Hello, little one," he murmured. Sophia rewarded him with a gummy smile and a string of drool. Lena watched the richest man she'd ever met let a 6-month-old conquer him completely in under 5 seconds. He looked up. "There's something else." From his coat pocket, he took a small velvet box. Lena tensed, but when he opened it, it wasn't jewelry. Inside lay a brass key, old and heavy, attached to a red ribbon. "It opens a house in Hudson, New York," he said. 2 hours north. Fully furnished. Staff if you want them, none if you don't. Title isn't a trust for Sophia. She'll own it free and clear the day she turns 18. Until then, you live there as long as you want. No cameras, no neighbors closer than half a mile. Best pediatrician in the state 40 minutes away. You can leave tomorrow, next week, never. Your choice. Lena stared at the key like it might bite. "Why?" The question came out raw. Alexander stood slowly. Because I looked at your daughter and realized I've spent 15 years making sure no one can ever take anything from me again. And I'm tired of it. I want to give something no one can take. Something that doesn't come with strings or interest rates or non-disclosure agreements. Just yours. He placed the box in her palm and closed her fingers over it. Then he stepped back, giving her the space she hadn't asked for but needed. I have calls, he said. I'll be in the study. Stay, go, scream at me, whatever you need. The key works either way. He walked out, leaving the door open behind him. Lena sat on the nursery floor a long time, the brass key cold against her skin, Sophia's happy babbling the only sound in the quiet house. Outside, the first real snow of the season began to fall, soft and relentless, covering the city in a hush that felt almost sacred. Inside, a girl who had nothing slowly turned the key over and over in her hand, trying to decide if doors that opened outward could ever truly be safe. And somewhere down the hall, a man who had everything listened to a baby's laughter echo through rooms that had never known it before, and felt the first crack appear in the armor he'd worn since he was 12 years old. Years slid past like pages turned by an unseen hand. The house in Hudson, stone and cedar, wrapped by sugar maples, became the place where Lena learned to breathe again. She planted lilacs along the driveway the first spring, and every May they burst into purple fire that perfumed the air for miles. Sophia learned to walk barefoot across the wide plank floors, chasing sunbeams and the echo of her own laughter. She called Lena Mama and the tall, quiet man who visited every weekend Alex, because Uncle felt too small for what he had become. Alexander never moved in. He kept an apartment in the city and a room at the Hudson house with a single bed and books he never finished, because he refused to crowd them. Instead, he arrived on Friday evenings with grocery bags full of ingredients Lena teased him for not knowing how to cook, and he stayed until Sunday night, when the city clawed him back. He learned to change diapers with the solemn concentration he once reserved for hostile takeovers. He read Good Night Moon so many times he could recite it in his sleep. And every year on the anniversary of the night he found them in the rain, he left a single brass key on the kitchen island tied with new red ribbon, a silent renewal of the promise that they could always leave. They never did. Sophia grew long-limbed and fearless, with her mother's dark hair and eyes that held a memory of every kindness ever shown her. She rode horses, spoke 3 languages before middle school, and never once doubted that the world was fundamentally good, because the 2 people who loved her most had spent a decade proving it every single day. Lena finished a degree she had abandoned when life broke her open. She opened a small community center in the nearest town. Nothing grand, just warm lights and secondhand books and a kitchen that always smelled of soup. Women came there the way she once wished someone had been there for her. She never accepted grants from Voss Enterprises. She wanted the place to belong to the people who needed it, not to the man who had saved her. Alexander respected the boundary the way he respected all of hers, even when it hurt. And it did hurt, sometimes. There were nights when the distance between Hudson and Manhattan felt like continents. Nights when Lena lay awake listening to the wind move through the lilacs and wondered what might have happened if she had ever let him stay. Nights when Alexander stood on the terrace of his empty penthouse, watching headlights crawl up the Hudson River, and felt the full weight of the space he had left unfilled on purpose. But love, real love, is not possession. They both knew that now. On Sophia's 16th birthday, the snow came early, thick and deliberate. The way it had the first night, everything changed. Alexander arrived with a cake large enough to feed the entire high school and a wrap box the size of a shoebox that he set on the table without ceremony. Inside was the original brass key, the one from the velvet box all those years ago, now polished bright and attached to a thin silver chain. Sophia turned it over in her palm, confused. I already have keys to this house. That one isn't for a house, Alexander said quietly. It's for a beginning. He told her the whole story that night, for the first time without softening the edges. The rain, the cardboard sign, the terror and the grace. He told her how her mother had once carried her through a city that wanted to swallow them both, and how one decision, one moment of reckless, stubborn mercy, had rewritten 3 lives forever. Sophia listened with tears sliding down her cheeks, and when he finished she walked straight into his arms and held on the way she had when she was small enough to fit against his chest. Lena watched from the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, eyes shining. Later, when the cake was reduced to crumbs and the guests had gone home through the swirling snow, the three of them stood on the front porch under the string lights Lena hung every December and never took down until spring. Sophia, taller than her mother now, looked out at the white fields and the dark tree line beyond. "I want to do what you did," she said suddenly. "Not the money part, the seeing part, the stopping part. I want to be the kind of person who refuses to walk past suffering just because it's easier." Alexander felt something inside his chest come fully, finally unlatched. Lena slipped her hand into his. After 16 years of careful distance, her fingers fit between his like they had always belonged there. "You already are," she told her daughter. Then, softer, to the man beside her, "We all are because of that night." Snow kept falling, erasing every footprint as soon as it was made, the way mercy does. Alexander lifted Lena's hand and pressed his lips to the place where a simple platinum band now lived, the one he had given her on a quiet morning 2 summers ago, when Sophia was away at camp and the lilacs were blooming, and he had finally asked the question he'd carried for over a decade. She had answered by kissing him so hard they both cried. Sophia leaned her head against his shoulder the way she used to when she was little and the world was too large. Far away, Manhattan's skyline glittered like a promise someone else had made, but here there was only the hush of snow and the warmth of 3 hearts that had learned, against every odd, how to beat in the same rhythm. Alexander looked at the woman whose hand he would never again let go of, and at the girl who had grown into the living proof that one act of outrageous kindness can redeem an entire lifetime. He thought of the 12-year-old boy on a curb with a garbage bag of clothes, waiting for a world that had already discarded him. He thought of the man he might have become if no one had stopped. And then he smiled, small, crooked, perfect, into the falling snow. "Thank you," he whispered, to the night, to fate, to the rain that had fallen 16 years ago and never really stopped. Lena heard him. She always did. She squeezed his hand once, leaned in, and answered against his lips the same 2 words she had given him the morning she finally said yes. "Thank you." Above them the lilacs waited under their blanket of snow, patient and certain, for another spring that would come no matter what winters tried to claim. And somewhere out there, in other cities, on other rainy corners, strangers still hurried past suffering because it was easier. But not all of them. Not tonight. Because once, a billionaire saw a homeless girl with a baby and refused to look away. And the world quietly, irrevocably, became a little less cruel, one rescued heart at a time. The snow kept falling. The porch light stayed on. And the 3 of them stood together long after the cold should have driven them inside, because some moments are too magnificent to end.